A brilliant, eccentric, quirky, and immensely interesting character, Flannery O'Connor is one of the most renowned and celebrated authors of the 20th century. O'Connor was born March 25, 1925 in Savannah, Georgia, part of the Bible Belt Deep South. Her own family was a fusion of two of the oldest Catholic families in Georgia. Thus she had strong roots in the religion which would later serve to shape the topics she took on in her writing. At age 15, her father passed away due to lupus, the disease that would eventually take her own life. O'Connor was devastated by the loss of her father, with whom she had had a close relationship, and decided to stay in Milledgeville, where she would attend Georgia State College for Women as a day student. In college, though she was interested in writing, her enthusiasm for cartoon drawing took center stage. O'Connor was an avid satiric cartoonist and an editor for the school's newspaper. She became locally known for these humorous depictions of life at an all-women's college and was well on her way on the journalistic track. In 1945, she continued to pursue journalism at the University of Iowa. She initially intended to be a political cartoonist. Yet finding that journalism was not very much her place, O'Connor entered into Paul Engel's well-known writing workshop to study creative writing. Many of the professors and writers she worked with in this program asserted the enormous amount of talent and gift for writing that she possessed. After receiving her master's in fine arts from Iowa University, O'Connor spent some time on writing her first novel, Wise Blood, at Yaddo, an artist retreat in Saratoga Springs, New York, where she spent 9 months. In 1949, to continue working on her writing, she moved into the Connecticut apartment of her close friends Sally and Robert Fitzgerald. Yet this peaceful time in her life was interrupted when O'Connor was diagnosed with lupus, the curable autoimmune disease. She was thus forced to move back to Milledgeville to live on the family dairy farm Andalusia. It was at this farm that O'Connor carried out the majority of the rest of her life. Despite the debilitating disease she was stricken with, O'Connor still found strength to continue pursuing her writing. She led a fairly simple yet profound life in Andalusia, where she would devote at least 3 hours each day to writing 7 days a week, attend Mass almost every morning, take occasional trips to lecture, and correspond with friends, family, and the literary world through writing letters. It was at Andalusia that O'Connor finished writing Wise Blood and completed the rest of her 3 works, The Violent Bear It Away, A Good Man Is Hard to Find, and Everything That Rises Must Converge. In 1964, after surgery, her health started to deteriorate, and on August 3rd of that year, Flannery O'Connor passed away at age 39. It is evident that Flannery O'Connor had a keen ability to drink in her surroundings, observe, and comment, and it was during her time at Andalusia that she was able to take time to observe the characters of the South that she saw all around her and who greatly affected her work. It is really amazing to think that though Flannery O'Connor died before her time at an extremely young age, and though she did not produce a vast amount of writing, she still is such a powerful literary figure. She made an immense mark on the literary world with the short time she had. O'Connor has been characterized as a Southern grotesque writer, though she did not necessarily enjoy this characterization, and additionally many deny O'Connor this characterization due to the absolute distinctness and uniqueness of her writing. Yet it is undisputable that the time and place in which she lived greatly affected her style and content of writing. Though O'Connor grew up in the heart area of the South and was largely affected in her writing by the context of these times, her writing does not focus largely on race relations, but rather centers around themes and ideas of theology and morality such as sin, guilt, redemption, and grace. Many mark her writing as pertaining to a Christian vision and a dark humor. She thus very much has a conscious intent in her writing to get across a message which was largely one centering around aspects of religion. Yet the stories she tells are not written with clear-cut, simple, preachy messages about how one is supposed to go about one's faith. Rather, they center around ambiguous characters who are often spiritually flawed, complex, and resisting of grace, who leave the reader challenged and confused, but thinking about these topics nonetheless. Here, she went about all day in a 6-year-old skirt and yellow sweatshirt with a faded cowboy on the horse embossed on it. She thought this was funny. Mrs. Hopewell thought it was an idiotic and showed simply that she was still a child. She was brilliant, but she didn't have a grain of sense. It seemed to Mrs. Hopewell that every year she grew less like other people and more like herself, bloated, rude, and squint-eyed. And she said such strange things. To her own mother she had said, without warning, without excuse, standing up in the middle of the meal, her face purple, her mouth half full, "Woman, do you ever look inside? Do you ever look inside and see what you are not? God." Mrs. Hopewell had no idea to this day what brought that on. She only had made the remark, hoping that Joy would take it in, that a smile never hurt anyone. The she referred to here is Joy Helga. It is very strange that Joy Helga wears this childish type of clothing, as she is a 32-year-old, highly educated woman. Yet the childishness of the clothes is extremely indicative. The faded cowboy embossed on her sweatshirt, keyword faded, is the representation of a discarded and forgotten into the past childhood belief in something heroic, something larger than oneself, something once believed in like a strong heroic cowboy, but now the belief is discarded and faded into the past, as Joy Helga would never currently believe in anything of that kind. So it is humorous that she would wear such a thing. Joy Helga seems to be the opposite of this hopeful, naive, faith-filled person that she might give off in wearing those childish clothes. This is indicative of the fact that the characters within this story may not be what they seem outwardly. Mrs. Hopewell is not the gracious, extremely nice, flawless human being she believes she is, merely pointing her is most definitely not the innocent, naive Bible salesman he says he is, and Joy Helga is not the smartest, most intelligent, intellectually superior, belief immune, enlightened being she believes she is. This is a foreshadowing that the characters ultimately might not be what they seem outwardly. The word child is highlighted because throughout the story there are many different comparisons between the various characters and children. By painting these comparisons and creating these ties between the characters and the children, the reader becomes aware of the fact that these characters are indeed naive, and though they might like to think of themselves as superior in different regards, they still have much to learn. One can be intellectual, which is Joy Helga's main claim to fame, yet completely void of sense in other aspects of life, most chiefly in her spirituality. This line highlights the tension between knowledge, the mind, and concrete facts, and then religion, belief, and spirituality. It highlights the fact that it is possible to have great intellect that Joy Helga has, but then completely be void of sense and miss the greater significance of things. Here, Mrs. Hopewell's character draws attention to the character flaw of Joy Helga's. Yet Mrs. Hopewell is absolutely not without flaw or critique. This line, she grew less like other people, more like herself, draws attention to the fact that Mrs. Hopewell directly contradicts herself in her sayings about how everybody is different and how it takes all kinds to make the world. But obviously she doesn't actually believe this if she doesn't even accept the differences of her own daughter and seems to want her to be like everyone else instead of becoming more like herself. Mrs. Hopewell is a hypocrite in that she is all talk. She utters these meaningless sayings that she actually never believes, carries out, or applies in her own life. Mrs. Hopewell flaws do not end here, however, as her character flaws become even more evident with her reaction to what Joy Helga says. It is almost comic that Mrs. Hopewell is not the least bit shaken by the outburst comment of her daughter. She seems to have no idea what prompted Joy Helga to say these strange things. Yet even more significant is that she does not even attempt to understand, which is very much revealing of Mrs. Hopewell's character. She never wants to be bothered by challenging her mind. She just takes things as they come, merely responding to them with stupid, meaningless, hypocritical sayings. Mrs. Hopewell is the epitome of the lip service Christians that Flannery O'Connor refuses to accept. The strange things mentioned here also mirror the instance on page 1344 where she opens one of Joy Helga's books and yet promptly closes it after reading such strange gibberish that makes her feel uncomfortable. Mrs. Hopewell does not take these instances as times in which she can challenge herself, actually look inward at her relationship with her faith to grow more profoundly, but rather shuts it all out and never questions anything to make it easy and not confusing. This outburst of Joy Helga's mounting frustration prompted unknowingly by Mrs. Hopewell and one of her meaningless sayings is really a funny punny moment. The use of God at the end of the statement is humorous in that it could be read as "Do you ever see what you are not, God?" as in God, you are so ridiculous, or it could be seen as "Do you ever see what you are not, God?" as in you are not God. In these ways, Joy Helga's character draws attention to major character flaws of Mrs. Hopewell's. The passage's significance lies in the fact that at the end of it, the reader is left unsure of who to like. This question of who is the hero and who is the villain, who is good and who is bad, is completely ambiguous within both the passage, but also within the entire story as a whole. Each character is able to highlight the other character's flaws and vice versa. This ambiguity is absolutely central and key in O'Connor's writing and indicative of O'Connor's belief that in her character's world, the good is under construction and not completely formed yet. The characters are not good or evil. They are under construction. The ambiguity is also indicative of a Flannery style in that she leaves nothing clear-cut and simple. There was definite commentary on the characters' different relationships of faith, spirituality, and God, yet it was never preachy or you should do this or that. It simply makes the reader think very long and hard, which is part of O'Connor's mastery as an author.